Hey guys and gals, before we get to this video about recovery runs, I wanted to just talk with you guys a little bit about this data right here. Looking at the views of my videos, I am noticing that almost 3/4 of you guys watching are not subscribed to the channel, and it would really mean a lot to me if you guys could hit that subscribe button if you're finding this at all helpful. It obviously doesn't cost anything to you. All it is if you are enjoying this, it has more likely of appearing in your feed and be recommended to other people that are interested in this type of content about running. So I usually release about 3 to 5 videos a week on running. Sometimes it's on how-to type videos. Sometimes it's race recap videos on the team that I coach. Sometimes it's videos from the workouts themselves. So there's a lot of different things on here. So if you have found this at all interesting, please move yourself from the 74% to more of this 26% of viewers so that the subscribers can jump up. It would mean a lot to me. It just sort of supports the channel and just kind of shows that you guys are interested in what we're doing. So if you are in that situation, you found this helpful, please hit that subscribe button. It would mean a lot to me. Hi everyone, cross-country enthusiasts. We're getting into the meat of the general preparation phase as we look at how we can really build our bulk volume with this workout type here. We're looking at the recovery run, specifically in the general preparation work phase of the season, and this is one of the critical workouts, the workouts that you absolutely positively must do and must do correctly in order to have success in the 5K cross-country, specifically if you're in the high school age range. So that's what we're really looking at here. We've already talked about the overall macro cycle, timing things, general prep, why it's important, some videos in the description down below you might be interested in, VO2 max testing to set up some workouts, and then the one that led directly into this video was long runs. And basically recovery runs are almost the same thing as long runs. There's a couple differences that you can look at here. It's just sort of the duration, the extent of them. But a lot of the things that you're doing for your long run, that's once a week, are here for the recovery run, but recovery runs are going to be happening a little bit more often. And there's some different things that you can do with your recovery run. So this is our team that made it to state a couple years ago. This was the 2017 team. 2018 team, not last year's team, but the year before, 2 years ago, that made it to the state meet. This was our third straight team, and on this team was a good mix of different levels of really pure distance kids and more of those middle distance kids. This was our number one at the time, Trey. He was a 3-time top 10 kid in the state meet, pure distance kid. Pure distance kid here. We had Jackson, pure distance kid, Thomas, Anthony, and Alex, pure distance kids. But we also had Josue, who was consistently under 2 in his 800, and then Nash right here, this tall young man, who was in the low 50s in the 400. So you had kind of various different ways here, and various different ways that you can get this critical workout in for your pure distance kids and your middle distance kids to get your recovery runs in. And the idea here is how can you build your miles while getting you ready for the next intense workout. So these workouts serve two things: building that mileage and recovering you, makes sense here, recovery run for the next more specific or more intense day. So let's get right into it. I'm Kyle Giacono. I'm the head boys cross country and track coach at Wharton High School in Tampa, Florida. This will be my 7th cross country season. I just completed my 7th track season with the program. Some of my other credentials are there on the screen. So again, these are the 3 different kind of genres of workouts during general prep. We've got critical, we've got important, and we've got not important. And not that they're not important for the part of the year, it's just the part of the year that we're in that you would not be doing these. So we've already talked about long run, we've talked about VO2 max testing. We'll talk about another type of VO2 max run in a future video, but now we're here in the recovery run. The workout, probably the only workout you're going to do more than once in a week or in a microcycle. These critical workouts are all vitally important to success in developing the key factors needed for success in the cross-country 5K. After we get done with all of these, we'll take a look at some of the important workouts in later subsequent videos. So the race metrics of the 5K, we've looked at this in the previous videos. The study done by Ingham in 2008, they found that who won the 5K, basically who had the most success, because I'm guessing if you were to look at 2nd, 3rd, and 4th place, it would probably stack up the same way. Whoever has the more developed VO2 max system, who can run the fastest aerobically, and that comes from different factors relating to aerobic fitness, wins 94.3% of the time. That's as sure of a guarantee as you can get in racing. So that's what we're looking at here. How can we improve VO2 max? And the specific aspect of that we're looking at here with the recovery run. From the USA Track and Field Distance Curriculum, we will find that the 5K is run very close to VO2 max. It's at 97% of it. That's why that pace or that fitness level is so critical to success in this event. And then from the study that was done or released in 2018 by Doctors Matter and Hartman, looking at the energy being supplied by the three various energy systems looked at in these races, we'll find that the available ATP that's just sitting in your muscles, and then the creatine, or I usually call it the creatine phosphate system, supplies 4% of the energy. Anaerobic glycolytic, 10% of the energy. These are the workouts we're going to deal with later in the year, the ones that are currently not so important. And then we've got the aerobic system that takes up the vast majority, the lion's share, 86% of the energy. This is when done at race pace. If you go out and you just walk a 5K, it'll be almost 100%, probably 99% aerobic. We're talking about at race pace here, race energy supply. So that's what we're dealing with here in the 5K. So I said there's aspects of VO2 max improvement. So we're looking at central VO2 max improvement here, and central VO2 max improves from general aerobic work done for at least 20 continuous minutes. That's the kind of the key thing. After 20 continuous minutes of aerobic work, and it really should be almost any work, basically over a heart rate of about 120, but you couldn't if you're doing anaerobic work doing it for 20 continuous minutes just by the nature of that energy system with the waste products that come with it. But after 20 continuous minutes, your heart will release a protein-like hormone that gets a ton of the aerobic benefits that we're going to see in a couple subsequent slides here. So that is the key. 20 minutes once you're in shape. I mean, your first time running, no, but after you've been working for a week or so, once you start to get a fitness level with your aerobic system, if you're not going 20 continuous minutes, you're not really making central VO2 max improvements. This can include intervals. I'll talk about this with VO2 max as long as your heart rate doesn't drop too much. Generally improves as the body increases the ability to move oxygen from the heart outward. That's why it's central VO2 max. So if you think your lungs take in the oxygen and then it goes into your heart via the various blood vessels, and then it goes out. We're looking at, in central VO2 max, improving your body's ability to get the oxygen from your heart, the central part of your body, outward. Okay, and that's where all these improvements are dealing with here. That's really where the bottleneck is with aerobic fitness level here. Our body does not store oxygen. It's very corrosive. We would not live very long if we were storing oxygen. And also, hopefully, we never get into a situation where we don't have oxygen for about a minute or so, because very bad things obviously happen. So this is the bottleneck for this type of work. Your body can store a decent amount of water. It can store a ton of energy in various ways, glycogen for about 2 hours of intense work, and it can store weeks worth of fat. Even skinny distance kids have a decent amount of fat stores where if they can live off of it. But oxygen is the bottleneck, and that's what this helps improve, is getting the oxygen to the working muscles away from your heart. Recovery runs act to add miles, so adding to this bulk of the after 20 continuous minutes time to develop this area. Okay? The key to central VO2 max improvement is continuous runs of at least 20 minutes, typically at low intensity. Like I said, you can do it with intervals. In a later video, I'll talk about how you can do a tempo run and then tack on a long cool down immediately afterwards so that you don't lose that 20-minute range. But a lot of it starts with this low intensity work. So being able to talk the whole time, at least when we're dealing with recovery runs. In the same way, if you saw the long run video, same thing. They should be able to talk the whole time on, or most of the time on this. There's one workout type that you can also kind of mix it up a little bit. The volume is the intensity on these days. Your training volume on these days. These are distance kids, and you can get this. Do not emphasize fastest pace possible. They will get the work in. Save your fast days for the fast days. Save your easy days for when you're getting the volume. A lot of times what you'll see is you'll have coaches that want people to run faster. They're looking closer for fastest pace possible. And what happens is you start to default to a lot of medium pace days. What are supposed to be easy days, your recovery runs become too fast, and then the next day what you're supposed to be recovering from when you're trying to do something faster like a VO2 max test or a tempo run or some of these other workouts that we've talked about or will talk about don't become as high intensity because you've done damage the day before, essentially. So on these days, let the volume be the intensity. Peripheral VO2 max we're not dealing with here, but that's how you improve with aerobic power, which is sometimes called VO2 max work, because these workouts are done right at your current VO2 max, 2-mile pace, typically 98 to 101% of it. You won't improve this aspect of VO2 max, peripheral VO2 max, if you do it too slowly or too fast. The reason being is so central VO2 max moves the oxygen away from your heart. Peripheral VO2 max is where your body grabs the oxygen off the blood cells, the red blood cells, off the hemoglobin and pulls it into the working muscles at the periphery, right? At your working muscles. In this case, more at your legs and that kind of thing. So that's why it's called peripheral VO2 max. And there's specific workout that can improve that. We've talked about one, the VO2 max test. It's in the description down below. And the next video, we'll talk about VO2 max intervals to improve this. Okay, we'll not spend too much time on it. So circulatory system improvements for the central VO2 max improvements that we're talking about with recovery runs. You're going to get more aerobic enzymes. More aerobic enzymes, more energy being produced aerobically. Bigger heart, specifically the left ventricle. This is one of the key training effects from the over 20 continuous minutes. This is critical. That pump, the left ventricle of your heart, is the pump that moves the oxygenated blood away from your heart. So this gets a little bit bigger with the training, with that over 20 continuous minutes, as does the increased muscle capillarization. More capillaries in the working muscle. So we're pumping away more blood from the heart that's full of oxygen. And now we've got more pathways for it to get as close as it can to the working muscles so that the aerobic enzymes can do their thing and the mitochondria using the aerobic enzymes can do their thing. We've got the powerhouse of the cell. If you think back to freshman biology, they are the powerhouse of the cell because they produce the energy aerobically. You get more and more of these little critters in your working muscles as you do the aerobic work, so you can get more energy aerobically. You'll also develop about an extra ½ liter to liter of blood so you can move more oxygen-rich blood around your body. And your red blood cells are just going to overall improve through this type of training. All of these are structural in nature, building different parts of your body, bigger heart, capillaries, all these things. So this is, because they are structural in nature, these aerobic system or circulatory system improvements, so they require a lot of time, and that's why these are the one of the critical workouts for general prep, because they take 20 plus weeks, and we're dealing with, at the beginning of this fictitious calendar we're going to look at here, 23 weeks from a state meet as sort of like that goal. So, other adaptations of recovery runs, we just looked at circulatory system, we've got muscle system. These are the same adaptations that you're getting from long runs that we discussed in a previous video. Slow twitch muscle fiber, also called aerobic muscles, are enhanced. They can actually get bigger. The cross-section gets a little bit bigger with about 6 months of training, so they are enhanced and they get a little bit bigger. We don't want to build a lot of muscle with our distance because that's extra weight, but they are enhanced and they can improve their ability to produce energy. We talked about increased capitalization. That also improves the muscular system as well as the circulatory system. Mitochondria help the muscles produce more energy, so same thing. And this is important here, so increased running economy. There are other workouts that will do this better, specifically a tempo or lactic threshold run, but you get running economy from just running miles. So this is simply a mileage type workout, so your body gets more economical in the muscles of using less energy to get from point A to point B, so that's why this improves running economy. Metabolically speaking, fats start to get stored and used. You can actually use fats at a little bit higher intensity the more you do these things. And we're going to store more fat close to the working muscles so the muscles can use them more readily. Increased glycogen. This is stored glucose or stored sugar. This is for faster energy, gets stored closer. You're going to use about 50% glycogen and stored fat on this day if you work right at aerobic threshold, which we'll talk about here in a second. Increased aerobic enzymes, so same kind of thing here. You're producing more energy aerobically, and same thing. This is also metabolic in nature. Increased running economy. You're using less metabolic energy to make the muscles contract and get from point A to point B. So, in short, all that we just talked about, these workouts serve to increase overall weekly miles for general aerobic development, central VO2 max, whatever you want to call it, while recovering you for more intense days so you can come back with something harder the next day. And I'll show you where to sequence these in our fictitious calendar a little bit later. But that's the whole name of the game here. You've got the long run, and we talked about that, 20% to 22% of your weekly volume. These are those other ways of building in just bulk miles to get your kids more aerobically fit in general. And you can come back the next day and you can do anything. We'll talk about this later on, but I mean, my favorite pre-race workout, the day before my kids are doing something cross-country or track-related, is 45-minute recovery run, about 6 miles for your developed boys, 7:30 pace. Super easy. There's no reason why, if they're aerobically fit, they can't do that and come back the next day. It's just like a walk in the park at this point. They'll be like, oh, only 6 miles? That's easy day, you know? So that's just sort of what this serves to do, is to build that weekly miles. So where do recovery runs fit in? This is from the USA Track and Field Distance Curriculum. I referenced it earlier about how the 5K is run at 97% of VO2 max. Here is VO2 max. There's a lot on this pace continuum, but all you need to look at is VO2 max is 100%. Different race paces are up here. The 5K, which we're dealing with right here, is 97%. We are all the way down here, almost off the energy continuum at the slowest pace possible to get fitness gains. Now, if you're going slower than 65% VO2 max, you're going to just, you can lose fat and that kind of thing. And in fact, if you look on, like, say, a treadmill or something like that, you might see a lower intensity setting that's called fat burning. There's a reason for that, and I really talked about this in a video about fuel subsources. I'll put it in the description down below, but you'll burn more fat than, stored sugar and that kind of thing at those lower intensities. So we want to be a little bit faster than that, but not too much. So we're going to deal with 65 to 70%. You can go up to 2 hours on that. This is what I'm calling aerobic threshold. So up to 2 hours. In the previous video on the long run, I said that I would recommend about maybe 90 minutes for like really when you're in really good shape after about a month of training for your long run, but we're not going to go that long on a recovery run because we don't want to go too crazy on the volume. I'll show you how to do this based on percentage of VO2 max test, but aerobic threshold can also be measured based on heart rate. So this is all based on percentages. So again, 100% is right here. If you're running the 800, you're obviously running faster than VO2 max because you're getting extra energy from the anaerobic system. Marathon is typically raced right here at 82%, 10K is at 92%. I said at 82% is the marathon. So we're all the way down here between 65 and 70%. But aerobic threshold, you can also do it based on heart rate. Be careful if you have a heart rate monitor on your wrist because it's not the most accurate. You can use it as sort of a guide. But what you can also do is you're looking for 120 to, I say 150 only because we get very hot temperatures here in Tampa, Florida. That raises it a little bit. Typically, you would really see more like 120 to 140 is in most parts of the country with normal type weather, not like what we have here where we're not going to see 60 degrees for probably about the next 4 months here in Tampa, Florida. You can do it by just putting as you're running, super low intensity, so it's not a big deal, up to your neck, and if you can count 20 to 25 in 10 seconds, you're good. If you're in a more normal area, probably 24, 23 to 24 is probably a little bit more appropriate. I just kind of, again, hybridize it for my situation here, and you should do the same thing to hybridize it with your situation. So that's one way you can look at aerobic threshold. And if you hear me say aerobic threshold, it's the same thing as this easy type pace. So let's see how we can set up what somebody's intensity might be for it based on a VO2 max test. I would recommend watching the video on VO2 max testing. It's in the description down below if you didn't watch that one before this, because we're going to build on that a little bit here. So I'm going to talk about the Ashton protocol here. This is the one that I use with my kids. I think it's the best thing for high school kids to do. Basically, you get a great warm-up, all your drills and everything, and you go and you run 2 miles, best possible pace. You can also get away with 3K on this, but there's a little bit more math involved. If you think that a kid is just not ready to run 2 miles and you're trying to kind of ease them up to it. And let's say that you have a pretty good high school boy, say in the general prep phase, June, July, and they go out and they go 10:30, or maybe it's a fantastic high school girl and they run 10:30. And then you can find whatever the mile pace is on that. If you're doing 3K, again, just find whatever their pace is. You're going to have to kind of project that out with a pace calculator. And this person, if they did 2 miles in 10:30, obviously is 5:15. And this is their date pace, and it's going to improve with time. So that is their current VO2 max, or the velocity at which their body reaches VO2 max, maximum oxygen use. So this is how you're going to set up the target for their recovery runs, which is exactly the same target as for the long run if you saw our previous video. It is 65 to 70%. Their current aerobic threshold, same thing. So what you do is you figure out, and there are some websites that'll do this for you. I do that quite often when I'm dealing with my whole group, but this is the math involved if you want to know. Figure out how many seconds are in their current VO2 max, which is 60 times 5, so plus 15, so we got 315 seconds here. Divide by 0.65 to get a bigger number, because this is obviously going to be a slower pace. 465 seconds. The slow end would be 8:05. And then the fast end, same thing, divide by 0.7 for 70%. We've got 730. This person's aerobic threshold is right in here. Now, advanced runners, I would actually tell them to stick right with this number. So if I had a kid that was in this situation and they weren't just some kind of like top-notch freshman that came in that was still kind of building their volume, someone that you've had for a full year, say, in your program. So they came out, and have had a complete training macrocycle, cross-country and track with you. stick with this number. I would tell this kid maybe run 725 to 740, give them a little bit of a window, but they're not going to get as much of a benefit out of this unless there's just something that is, you know, maybe you really hit them hard the day before or something. Target this with your more advanced kids. Your group of kids that have been with you for only, you know, less than a year, first cross-country season, maybe their first track season, maybe they came out for track and it's their first cross-country season, give them this bigger window so there's a little bit more wiggle room. So most of the days, unless you have a specific reason, you're advanced kids. And when I say advanced, I mean advanced in terms of training age with you, experience, not ability level. If they're still first year with you, give them the bigger range would be my recommendation. The other test that I recommend is the VHO protocol. It is 1 mile after a good warm-up, best intensity. When you're dealing with this, it's when you're dealing with a kid that is maybe an 800-meter kid in track and they want to give cross-country a try. You're going to want to eventually get them to the Ashram protocol because they're not actually getting VO2 max development when they're running a mile best effort, but it's sort of a starting point, maybe the first 1 or 2, or if you have brand new kids, you've got that kid that shows up and you know, they're going to be a freshman, they've got all their stuff filled out to be a student at your school and they're all cleared, and they're like, oh, I've never really run before, or oh yeah, I played soccer maybe 6 months ago, or oh yeah, I sometimes run around my neighborhood. You could give them this for the first couple times too to get them used to it, but eventually get them up to a longer test. It's more accurate and better development. 1 mile, let's say that this kid went out and they ran 4:55 on this test. We want to find 91% of that pace, so the math is 4 times 60 plus 55. We're dealing with 295 seconds. We are going to divide that by 0.91, again to get a larger number for their current VVO2 max, so 324 seconds. If this person ran 4:55 best effort, their current date pace VVO2 max would be 5:24. So obviously somebody that runs 4:55, this is not as impressive as running 10:30. So this person's in better aerobic shape than this person. I think most people would sort of agree on this. This person might be in better shape anaerobically, but this person's definitely in better shape aerobically. I'd say that if you were to kind of go through all the math, it'd be more like 4:48, 4:49, something like that to get a straight conversion on that. Recovery run targets, same thing. We're looking for 65 to 70%, so the math is exactly the same. You're getting the total number of seconds in here, which is 324. Divide by 0.65, we've got 498 or 818 pace. And then same thing for 70%, we've got 743. So that would be this person's range, but just like anybody else. This is probably not your advanced runner if you're doing this on them, but if it was for whatever reason, maybe it's a kid that you really shortened in the track season, you're just trying to work them back into it, even if they've been with you for a year or two. You might want to give them the bigger window if you're somebody in that situation. Maybe they ran the whole summer and they're more interested in the 800, 400 in that time of year, and they're just trying to come back out for cross country. In testing, if you did this and somebody, say they ran 10:30 one time and they came back the next time and they ran 10:32, you could keep the next one, this pace for about for the next bit. I wouldn't kind of change it the opposite direction unless you saw some lack of fitness or maybe there was an injury or something that you wanted to kind of move them down with. So, training design for recovery runs. For distance runners, recovery runs, a couple different ways you can do this. This is the one you're going to do the most, I would recommend, recovery runs. You're going to have several per microcycle. This is the only workout. You're going to have several per microcycle. They're very simple, but they are important, so that's why the design here. Just because something is simple doesn't mean that it's not important. So we've got several per microcycle, again, to build that bulk volume and to recover for more intense days. Recommended 30 to 60 minutes. You know, the first week back, you're probably going to give them some 20 to 30 minute runs, but then 30 to 60 minutes. If you're going less than 20 minutes, as we talked before, you're not getting anything out of it really aerobically. You might have a psychological reason of doing it, but not truly training-wise. And if you're going over 60 minutes, you're probably actually more like a short, long run or something like that. So stick to this. Quite often, I'll get up to 60 minutes if I need to get to a certain volume for the week for the kids. Once they're in shape, the difference between 45 minutes and 60 minutes is nothing at this intensity. It's really not too challenging for them. Have them kind of check for correct zone kind of throughout if they have a GPS. If they've got one of those heart rate monitors that goes around their chest, that is fantastic. That's sort of the best if they have a heart rate monitor, but I also, as I said, that heart rate check that you can do. And then there's a talk test. Can they talk the whole time? And when I say talk, I don't mean can they answer with one-word answers. I mean, if you said to them, hey, tell me about what happened in your world history class today, and they start explaining something sort of complex, then you know they're okay because they have enough oxygen to get through a more complex conversation. You probably won't need breaks on these. They're probably going to want to blow right through it. My sort of sweet spot is 45 minutes on these after about the first week or so. And they're probably not going to need a break, maybe on really hot days after 30 minutes. But if you do need a break, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, just to grab some water. You don't want their heart rate to drop because you're going to, if you go for, I tell you 30 seconds knowing that it probably won't get out to a minute if I tell them 30 seconds when they're out doing their run. You're risking the heart rate dropping, resetting that 20-minute window that you need for central VO2 max improvement that we've talked about previously. Your heart rate drops below 120. Well, now you're in that zone of, oh man, I may reset it, and now you may turn a recovery run, instead of being, say, one 45-minute run where you're going to get, all the, subtract the 20 minutes of setup on that, you're going to get 25 minutes of aerobic development. Well, if you go, say, 20 minutes, or say 25 minutes, and then you stop for 2, and then you go out for the remaining part of the run, well, you've really only gotten, 5 minutes of aerobic development there because of the way that it was done in all these adaptations that we're looking for. So be careful about breaks. And when your kids are in shape, they're not even going to want... I mean, I've had it to where my kids on the long run, we're going for, 75, 85, 90 minutes, and they just want to go all the way through because this is not high-intensity stuff that they're doing once they're in shape. And as I mentioned, this is a great pre-race workout. This is my go-to. As we get later in the season and you want to kind of psychologically save them, you can kind of to shorten it to like 30 minutes or whatever. But typically, the day before the race, we're doing 45 minutes easy and some strides afterwards. We'll talk about strides here in a little bit. Recovery runs with pickups, you can do this too. Simply add a period of somewhat faster running for a short period, i.e., say we're going to do 4 to 6 times 30 to 60 second pickups. It's good as a transition to faster aerobic workouts like VO2 max or tempo runs. I don't get crazy with this. I just kind of throw it in some days as if I see maybe I have back-to-back recovery runs, and it adds some variety early. As you get later in the training year, you're going to do less and less of these because you're going to have more intense days kind of taking up. You're not going to have like back-to-back recovery runs. Breaks again may not be needed just like before as you're going through it. They're not racing this. Think a tempo type run, a medium pace type of thing. Just kind of mix things up a little bit. You got a short mid-distance kid, you're trying to move up. Recovery runs, you're still going to have several per microcycle, but you're probably going to shorten them. This is where it comes in with you. This is really sort of that playing it by ear as you're doing it. You still want to make sure they're in the correct zone with GPS, heart rate, talk test, everything we talked about. Breaks still need to be short. Intensity is the same as with distance runners, and I think it's a dangerous thing when you see a lot of people will say, well, this is a mid-distance runner, they need to go faster. There are so many reasons why you don't want to do it. Their aerobic system is still acting the same, and it's underdeveloped, and you're trying to develop it. What makes these kids special is, yes, they have more fast-twitch muscle fibers, and you don't want to smack it, and by going faster, you're going to smack it. That's the thing, and these kids are naturally going to want to go faster, so you need to kind of be the one to get in there and say, don't push the pace. Their aerobic threshold is the same percent, and it's probably going to be slower than your pure distance kids because they're not going to be as aerobically in shape to do those VO2 max tests we were talking about. So, do not push the pace just because these are mid-distance runners. That only serves to wear them out, and you talk about, a lot of times you'll have sprint coaches say, I don't want my kids to run cross-country, it hurts their speed. Well, it's probably because of this aspect. If you run too many workouts at that medium-type pace and asks them to call on more of their fast-twitch muscle fibers to go faster, it's going to cause what's called fast-twitch type 2, those muscle fibers that can act fast or slow, these muscle fibers to act more like slow twitch. They start acting more aerobically, they develop more mitochondria and that kind of thing, and you do potentially damage what these kids do well. Aerobic threshold does not do that because it does not really activate these type 2 muscle fibers very much. It's only activating the slow twitch. So, do not ruin your kid's speed. Do not push the pace on these recovery runs. Slower is not the key, but the right percentage is the key, and typically it is slower for these kids. Something you can also do with these kids, just kind of like sort of boost things up for them a little bit, is to do a track recovery run, maybe 20 to 35 minutes, something like that, broken up as a track interval. So maybe you've got a kid that's used to running intervals in track, and they like track a little bit more, while you have your distance kids and they're doing recovery runs or recovery runs with pickups. Have these kids come to the track with you. You're probably not going to have a ton of them. Like, all right, we're gonna do some intervals of 800s, and you're gonna give them a pace that's gonna be relatively slow because it's going to be in the recovery run, but you're gonna give them very short breaks, 15 seconds, 30 seconds, something like that, and you can kind of sneakily get their volume up as you're doing it. The breaks are still gonna count as the time because you're not gonna give them a long enough break to reset their training zone, and it's one way you can get these kids that don't necessarily love cross country a more happy way of getting their volume up in a track recovery run type fashion. Again, check for aerobic threshold during these intervals. If done correctly, recovery runs require only 24 hours of recovery. Fatigue, just like with long runs, is central nervous system, and it wears off in 12 to 24 hours, making placement extremely easy. We'll talk about here in 1 second. The only way these take longer to recover from is if you go too long, like you give them a 70-minute run and you call it a recovery run, and that should have been closer to probably a long run, or if they go too fast, they push the pace. That's why you have to be kind of careful with these, and you don't want to do them when you have more intense days kind of in and around them, just kind of as, again, this is a transition. I typically only do these maybe the first 2 or 3 weeks of the year, especially with these kids if they push the pace. But if you don't, if you do them correctly, 12 to 24 hours, placement is a breeze.
An eternity later.
Let's take a look at our fictitious macrocycle. Again, we're looking just at general prep here. We talked about this. Most places you're not allowed to work with your kids directly or indirectly. That's how it is with us right now in Tampa, Florida. So this is all based on a fictitious calendar. In a normal year when we had our track season, I wouldn't be able to do this either because our track meet here in Florida is right here, so we'd want to give them a longer break. But this is backdated from our state meet, which is hopefully going to be on November 7th. So that's what this is all backdated from, a 23-week macrocycle. You want 20-plus weeks for aerobic peaking, so that's what we're kind of looking at here. So I've talked about this transitionary period where you're probably just going to have your kids do some easy stuff on their own after they've been off for 1, 2, 3 weeks. 20 to 30 minutes easy. These are your first recovery runs. Just go out, go easy. We'll talk about some striding in here, but this is your first sort of recovery runs here, and they can, especially these are probably kids that are coming back from you. You're probably not getting new kids. Our school year would normally have ended here on the 29th of May, so you're probably not getting a ton of new kids, probably kids maybe from your track season that have never done cross country, but you're probably going to be getting your incoming freshmen and things like that a little bit later on, so a lot of these kids can do some of this stuff on their own. So the recovery runs are all highlighted in yellow, and that's where they all kind of fit in. I've got from our previous videos where our VO2 max tests come in here, and then I've got our long runs from our last video sort of penciled in. Long run here, long run, long run. As you can see, the recovery runs are the only thing so far that are manifesting themselves several times. Here's our first week kind of back together. I would probably make one of these to one of those pickup runs that I was telling you about, just to mix things up. Got some different things in here. I'll probably make this one a pickup run because long run right after a recovery run. You might want to vary this a little bit. Same thing here. And after this, I probably wouldn't do those pickups. As you can see, you're getting a ton of these in here. These are building your bulk volume. Now, I will do a video afterwards with kind of volume that I recommend with my kids and my situation that I've done that might give you an idea. I think that talking about volume is really easy that coaches do, but it's sort of the least important thing. You know your kids and what they can kind of handle. There was a point in time when, I was only doing 40 miles a week, and I've kind of gotten to the point where in cross country, my top kids are doing about 60 miles a week. But I didn't get them to 60 miles a week the first year. It took about a year and a half to 2 years of building volume to get there, and that's what works for us now. And the recovery runs are a great way of kind of getting you to that point. July, you'll still see a ton of recovery runs, but what you're starting to see is they're starting to get kind of mixed in a little bit fewer of them. You don't see those back-to-back. You see back-to-back with long runs, and what I'll probably do on these days, we've got an area that we can, a lot of our long runs are at a place called Flat Woods, a lot of flat land here in Florida, obviously, but there is a place that we can do some longer runs on hills, and I'll talk about hills a little bit later, and that's why these are kind of backdoored, because these are going to be in that situation, but you're noticing they're not back-to-back anymore because we're able to kind of do some other specific things that take only 24 hours of recovery too, that serve some more specific types of things. So this is all the way through July, and then we're coming down to August, and you're seeing this is the last week of general prep. We've only got one recovery run on that last week as we're starting to make that transition to some different type of more specific work in specific prep. You're seeing a lot more spacing out of these workouts. So that's how that works. As you get more aerobically fit from things like the recovery runs, you can do some other things. So that's how you could pencil this into a fictitious macrocycle for general prep. Getting back to this, I talked about striding. So stridings on easy days, a lot of talk about, a lot of people do them, and you should do them, but just to kind of talk about what striding really can do for you. There is great reason to do this, but it's not for what many people think. You will absolutely not build any speed development in any way on striding after these types of run. 100% no. Speed is developed when your kids are fresh, right? They have to, if you're trying to develop speed, and that's one of the biggest things is knowing what you want to train today, it has to be at the beginning, right? Anything explosive has to be at the beginning because they're going to be fatigued. They're not going to get any speed development after they've gone out and run, 45 minutes. I mean, they're going to have central nervous system fatigue. That's not what's going on here in any way, shape, or form. So if you're trying to develop speed, you're not going to get it with striding, right? So that's not the good reason, and there's a very good reason why you would stride. Striding works on mechanical breakdowns that are common in longer type runs. Recovery runs, long runs, whatever, same type of thing. Aerobic threshold type things. While also, it wakes up the central nervous system, right? So you've done a lot of these contacts. You're going out and you're running 45 minutes, say 6 miles or whatever. You're going to get, several thousand contacts in there, typically on most people's stride pattern, between 1,200 and 1,500 contacts or steps per mile. So you're getting a lot of contacts. That firing in the contacts fatigues the central nervous system. And you kind of want to wake it up and fix some mechanical breakdowns. Long runs, you can get bad arm carriage, you can get leaning, all these different things. And from the low intensity contacts, right? So striding can help fix that, okay? From just the shorter, slightly faster things to fix the mechanical issues, knee drive, arm carriage, all those things that you really want to kind of see from your kids, and to just wake up that central nervous system that's kind of going a little bit sluggish from all of the work it's just doing. I would just start with some maybe 4 medium-ish pace strides, build up a little bit, so 4 medium pace strides, say 50 to 80 meters. It's not super critical how far it is. I would say walk back recovery is probably more important than the length. If you were to build any acid, which you shouldn't if they're medium pace, it would, for the most part, clear with a walk back recovery. Do not let them race each other on this, and they're high school kids, they're sometimes idiots, so you have to kind of definitely jump in there sometimes. Do not let them race this. Medium. If your kid knows what a tempo run should feel like, it should be no faster than that. Just medium type things. Really cue them on, knee drive, good upright posture, good arm swing, arm carriage, and all those things on these. You could build up to about 6 of these, saying length, saying recovery. Again, I would recommend these on recovery runs and on your long run days. It's most likely not needed on other days because the fatigue won't be on the central nervous system. There's some thought that you might want to do these on a tempo type run, your medium type workouts. I don't think it's all that necessary. You don't usually see form breakdowns on those quite as much. They're typically a little bit shorter, and you're going to kind of mix the pace up a little bit. There's some other things I like to do after those days that I think are a little bit more helpful for your kids. So typically the first few, and this is the last point here, especially on your long run. I know we did a long run video, but if you've got a longer recovery run of 60 minutes, or if you've got a long run that's 90 minutes, the first one, oh man, it is very uncomfortable to do a stride, but they typically feel much better after 2, 3, 4 of these, and it wakes up the central nervous system to get them back on point. So if they feel that it's like, oh wow, that first one just felt awful, that's kind of normal. Not so much on a normal recovery run, 30 to 45 minutes or whatever. Longer ones, you might be a little bit more uncomfortable on those just to kind of get started, but they'll typically feel a little bit better afterwards. So, if you like this video, please think about liking or subscribing. As I said, love to get more than 74% of my views coming from non-subscribers. So if you enjoyed this, please hit that subscribe button. Also, hit the like button if you like this video, and if you did find it helpful, maybe think about sharing this around with other people that might be interested. I do release about 3 to 5 videos on different running things, different running categories throughout the year. If you're at all interested. If you have any questions or comments, please ask them in the comments down below. I had a couple of videos that I mentioned. Please check those out if you didn't see them, or if you just want a kind of a refresher. And next video, like I said, I'm going to do a VO2 max interval workout, a different way that you can develop that other part of VO2 max, the peripheral VO2 max. So look forward to that over the next day or two. And until next time, this has been Coachy TV.